Yo, 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 what is going on, CoD Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder, and in today's video, we are going to be talking about some community uproar / maybe drama, but really more just pitchforks and wooden stakes and tartar sauce that's been thrown out of the barn, we'll say. Today is going to be about the member capacity changes, and this is something that has caused a lot of people in the community to share their voices. And what are we talking about specifically? Well, this is where we ended up having what was supposed to be kind of a 200 member cap. And essentially what's happening is that once you get back in Home Kingdom and the boost has gone off, then you're going back down to 165. And then once you get to KVK, you can then boost that number back up. And so we're going to be showing you a big suggestion that has garnered a lot of votes. We'll show you some specific language that was mentioned from patch 1.0.25, even if it may have been broadly. And then I'm going to give you my thoughts on, do I think them lowering alliance capacity or keeping it is the best route or a good play for the game's future and going forward. So as always, if you enjoyed the content, make sure you throw us up because it helps out a lot. So let's first go and take a look at what was actually said. And so for that, we kind of have to go back a little bit. So here, this was posted on July 17th. Right? So this is a couple days old, where people were talking about they should have told us earlier, right? You see, even if we kind of scroll up a little bit, right? Boo had said, people just got to split into 160s, or better yet, CoD needs to let multiple teams register for row like they do in Rock. Right, this is response circuit. I mean, it's not really fair to the game. It's going to hurt every alliance. It's actually, most hurt alliances similar to Echo, only one row team. So if you don't want to split up 160 plus some change in a secondary shell, right? Boo says, doesn't matter if it hurts me, it's fair for the game. Else, why not make one server and one alliance with a limited member count? It's an interesting point. We may touch on that a little bit later. Previous response was like, I'm just making sure you're aware, since sometimes you need the extra help. This is also changes hurts you. All right, so again, basically just really kind of talking about a lot of these changes. Now, let's go, and I'll just scroll right back here to my post. So this is where some people, I think, were under this impression that they did not let us know. They are kind of right and kind of not right in that breath. If we read the quote here from patch 1.0.25, if you go to the number 4 section here, which is returning to home realm, you can see I quoted this, and I also linked to where that was here on the Discord. It says, the current alliance temporary member bonus or boost will be preserved and will last for 1 month. This is for when alliances return to home realm. Now keep in mind, this was 2 updates ago, or 3 updates if you want to count 0.27 from the last. The challenge is that they weren't specific in their patch notes to actually let us know how many would be going down. Now, then you end up, because you have to understand that once the update dropped, and then we had alliances going into Home Kingdom, then people started figuring it out because you could see what the number was there for. However, keep in mind that this is something that is, once the update dropped, right, it's starting to hit people more now. And as far as more, because we have more kingdoms going into Home Kingdom, right, recently, because you have to understand that there was a batch of kingdoms that went into Home Kingdom first. We covered this with kingdoms like 333, right? I think they were the first one to go in. And then you had some of the other kingdoms around that area or that range. But for the OG kingdoms, the ones that were between maybe 1 and 150, right, maybe even going as high as 200, they all kind of had delayed introductions because they had to finish their seasons off, or by the time some of them even finished their seasons, but they started a new season before the Home Kingdom came out. So they got anywhere from a small to a larger delay before they were able to go into Home Kingdom. And so that's why, if you're wondering why is there this uproar when the fact is they mentioned this 3 updates ago that it was going to hit, that's what you have to understand, is that the timelines just did not add up for when some of these kingdoms would be able to see the after effects from that update 3 updates ago. And so now we get to this situation where we see people kind of posting this announcement. If we look at like the TFS Discord, at least on the public side, right, that everyone has access to, you can see Jason made a post here, along with a number of other, I think a few other Discords that made posts as well. But this was a suggestion that was then provided, right? So let's read through this. So this says, we in the game have seen you have lowered the alliance member capacity from the current 200 to 165 for many. Now, some alliances have been able to get over 200, but it should be stated that they did come out and say that this was supposed to be a hard cap. So the idea is that you can raise this, right, up to 200, right, which is what they had came out and said it would be once you get into KVK. But then once you go back to the home kingdom, right, this number lowers. So current 200 165. For many of us who play the game, this is a huge change that will negatively affect many alliances in many aspects of the game, from leadership planning, battle strategies, to everyday players and participating in Roots of War. There is no benefit that we can see from lowering the alliance member capacity. This will also impact the community aspect that has been built across multiple kingdoms. Many players want to continue playing with their friends, and lowering this will make it hard for leadership to keep tight-knit groups together and still be effective and fair amongst all players. So let's also show you this just to provide some clear understandings, right, for the KVK. So if we go into Season of Strife, let's take a look at, I think theirs is number 3, right? So this is the TFS group. So let's go into their KVK, and we're going to go into their section, and I think they're top left, if I have this correct. Yeah. So let's click on them. This is the long way of doing it, but we'll do this. And if we click on this, you can see they're already at 200 over 200, right? So they've already increased their cap a couple days in to the latest season. And so again, I just wanted to show that off, right? So people can see, like, this is where they're at in the KVK, right? And understanding that, right, that is more of a home kingdom approach. So the suggestion is this: do not change the alliance member limit and leave it as 200. Or one that I would personally like to see: increase the capacity for all alliances, as a lot of time in the game has passed and many more people would like to play with each other under one shell. Either way, can the devs please address the upcoming issue that will affect all alliances in the next KVK? As the next KVK starts, any insight to this would be highly appreciated, right? Thank you in advance, the CoD player base. Yeah. Okay, I feel a lot better. Now, this has 1,229 upvotes, and it has 55 downvotes, and we say that because, keep in mind, the bot auto puts 1 upvote and 1 downvote there, so you have to -1 from each. With that in mind, this is a lot of upvotes to a point where they're most likely going to have to acknowledge this. Now, my thoughts around this is that, number one, we have to understand that this is really a home kingdom challenge, right? Is that the cap is being lowered there, but then it's allowing for you to increase it once you go to KVK. However, if you do want to allow for any maneuvering or adjustments to be made, doing that from KVK to your home kingdom, and really more so once you're in the home kingdom, to do any planning. Like, let's say you need to move some players around. Let's say you want to do some mock battles, or you want to do some testing, and maybe you want to do it with a lot of players from each of the alliances. Maybe you want to do it with full alliances. The challenge begins, and you could say it is kind of more of a small thing at the end of the day, but because keep in mind, right, you can move players from one alliance. Like, let's say in the worst case scenario, you have one alliance that's in your kingdom. You can move half the players to another shell and do mock battles, right? And then once you get into KVK, you wait a couple days just to raise the cap to 200. You move everyone back, right? In the grand scheme of things, this is not the end of the world. However, one of the main challenges here that I just don't, for me, it feels like maybe the devs aren't seeing it maybe from this side, is that when you are having a constant decrease and increase and decrease and increase, and it's like a temporary deflation, right, or temporary removal, and then it goes back up, it does cause for a level of stress and just annoyance at the end of the day, because you have to always be thinking about, who am I going to get in every season, especially if you have migrants that are coming in. And if you're going to have to lower this to 165 once the home kingdom, that means that no one's going to be able to leave the alliance, really. Obviously, if they're not going to be able to come back in, right? If they're constantly staying over the cap. So logistically, it is a headache, and I can understand that from the alliance management's perspective. In my view, right, I don't see why they're lowering the cap. To me, just keep everything consistent, right? Now, when they talked about how in home kingdom you wouldn't, you'd have to rebuild back up your territory, and then eventually the same thing in KVK. I don't really understand. I don't get why you're making it so complicated. I don't understand why they're making it to where you have to then reestablish reestablish member capacity. Why not just have the member capacity be a flat rate? Do not apply any member capacity boosts in KVK, and then just have it be the general bonuses, right, that you get. There's nothing wrong with that. Just like there's nothing really wrong with that in Home Kingdom, right? And so, I think when I start looking at it now, it's either you do it. I think there's two ways to do this. You either allow for whatever the capacity is able to be reached in Home Kingdom, apply to KVK, and then it's just a passive capacity at that point, so you don't have to worry about it, because once you've achieved 200 over 200 in Home Kingdom, then it'll just automatically apply to KVK. Or you remove all of the member capacity buffs from behemoths, and then you just reinvest those into Alliance Tech, forts, and flags, as an example, right? Or your CF, fort, flag, however you're going to do it. And then you just have it be that way, right? So that way you at least have to rebuild those things out. Right? You'd have to rebuild those things out in Home Kingdom, and then it would just apply that way. So, again, I don't see anything wrong with them just doing one of those two options, because I think the idea is that you don't want to have to worry about your capacity fluctuating between Home Kingdom and KVK, whether you're going to and or when you come back. And so I think just making it a little bit easier across the board is simple. Now, the second point here is about lowering the alliance capacity. Well, before I even get there, let me say really what I think number two is the challenge is the way that this was communicated. So when you don't provide a specific example, when you are going to make a change, for example, right, as they stated, when in 1.0.25 for that update, and they said that it's a temporary bonus, well, give us an example. What does that look like? How much is the temporary bonus? What is it going to be going back down to? I mean, these are just ways to provide a little more transparency and clearer communication to the community. And so they could have said, here's an example of Alliance A who went into this KVK and they had this capacity. They go back to Home Kingdom, and when the boost runs out, they'll have this capacity, right? That is not a difficult thing to do, but it also allows for people to have an actual example and something specific to take with them so they can prepare. Again, what the game overall, and I think what the devs, hopefully, I would say, in order to convey to where there's a little bit more of a connection there on understanding how a community really keeps spinning and is being upheld, more importantly, by the management teams for alliances. This is something I've said before. Developers should be aiming to really bridge that gap and to connect to where they have a full understanding or a fuller understanding and comprehension of what it is like to be someone in management for an alliance or a kingdom, because these are the people that basically represent your entire player base, 99% of it, because you're not often finding, thousands of players that are alliance lists or even hundreds of players that are alliances within a kingdom, right? Mostly everyone joins an alliance. And so, again, when you think about people who are R5s and R4s, they are very much the cornerstone for what that initial introduction is going to be, and then sustained experience for a player coming into the game. And so for me, again, it is just I hope people understand where I'm coming from on there, right? Where you basically kind of have to look at R5s and R4s as an extension of I don't want to say of developers, but of game representation. For how because again, if you have a really bad experience in Alliance, that can cause people to leave and quit. If you have a great experience in Alliance, that can cause you to stay. It could even cause you to maybe spend some money or spend more money. And so there's such a direct correlation between that. Anyways, without going too deep in there, because this is not a TED Talk. Number 3 is that, what do I think about this idea of lowering Alliance capacity? Well, I'm glad you asked. I, for one, am somewhat in favor. And there's two ways to look at this, right? I'm somewhat in favor of lowering alliance capacity. I would say maybe as low as 150, but again, maybe somewhere like 1 to 175, 150 to 175, I think would be okay. I do somewhat like the 150 idea. However, let me explain here. The reason, and I'm going to attack this from kind of two sides. If we talk about the kingdom capacity side, which is that, and as we know this now from when we last took capacity data, right, and we looked at a lot of these kingdoms, and I'll give you a great example here. So if we go in game, and let's look at the same one we just did, right? So let me click on 23. Notice how, at the moment, right, 23 is full. Notice how 61 is full, 5 is full, 70 is full. Let's go up here, and, oh, I'm sorry. Actually, they all might be full if they're in oh gosh, let me see here. Okay, thank God. Thank God they're not all full. Okay, so these kingdoms are full. Now, what you have to understand is that these kingdoms were not full before they went into SOS. So during the migration window, they were still crowded, right? And TFS still had about 118, almost 110 slots, something around there, right? They recruited 114 because they recruited 186 people into their kingdom. They were still orange before SOS started, but now they're red. And that's obviously because there's probably a lot of fighting that's going on, right? And just the way that the individual player influence factors into kingdom influence, right? It takes for granted your activity, your merits gain, power growth, etc., right? So it is understandable on why they would probably be red, right? And why they could be red as they are, along with a number of other kingdoms, right? And they're not obviously full-blown fighting right now. But because of things like power growth, they're probably doing merit trading, etc. Right? Some of those things are factoring from individual player influence to overall kingdom influence. But the reason why this still worries me a bit, and we touched on this in a previous video, is that you have these kingdoms, right? Kingdom 23 is the strongest kingdom in the game just by power, right? They came in, I think, a little over 37 billion power when we did our last top 25 video a couple days ago. And so you look at that situation and you think to yourself, okay, well, when they come out of the KVK and they go into the next migration window, they're probably going to be crowded. Like there's the data leans that way. And so if they are, they're going to be able to recruit a lot more people coming in. And when we think about lowering the player capacity, if depending on what the cap is, on what the kingdom cap is for either total power or total activity, which it's probably more power than it is activity before it ends up turning red, is that how many total active players are you going to be getting in your kingdom in order to sustain multiple active alliances? We were having this conversation with, I think, Grand, who else was there? The Bull was there. I think Ken, Panties Brook was there, and a couple other people. And so this was a couple days ago. We were talking about this idea of lowering the alliance capacity. And my view on it was simply because I felt like it allowed for things like the warband system to be more utilized, right? Where you could have up to 4 alliances there with this idea of having multiple active alliances and potentially even more balanced alliances. So you can utilize the warband more to its fullest extent, right? Without having 1 or 2 active alliances, then just kind of filling the remainder with shells, right? Or kind of light, very low active alliances. And on top of that, with the game going from kind of an alliance-focused approach to now more of a kingdom-focused approach, a little bit more in line with Rise of Kingdoms. So these trends have kind of been happening where we've seen this transition from where CoD started to now the direction it's going in, at least from the last number of updates. And so because of this, I feel that if you lower the alliance capacity, it allows for the members to spread out in more multiple alliances. But then you also have to think about and factor in, well, what is the map design? Does the map design favor multiple alliances, which would apply for a warband or could be utilized from a warband, right? When we think about how many paths there are, how many routes can be taken through choke points, through bridges, up or down ramps, those are things that are just as equally as important, because if the choke points are not wide enough to accommodate 2, 3, or 4 alliances that want to build in a single or 2 directions, or if there's not at least 4 paths to get to from one side of a zone to the other, then it kind of doesn't really make sense, so to speak, with the warband system, because then now bear in mind, you can still TP on other people's territory, but the challenge there, and we were having a conversation about this as well, is that, and I'll probably do a separate video on this too, is where players, if you're like an example here, if TFS wanted to TP on AFS territory, well, they could still get rallied, right? That's what's been explained to me. And again, it is iffy because on one end, I think to myself that doesn't make any sense, because if the whole point of the warband system is to be allied and unioned and to share, basically have cross-alliance perks and benefits, why would you allow people to be rallied on just because they're on a different alliance territory, but they're within that warband? Like, that part is just a huge disconnect for me. So, and again, that's just the side I fall on for that. But really, when it comes to map design, that to me, I think, and zone design is really probably the bigger portion on, are you going to be able to utilize this warband? Are you going to be able to take advantage of the kingdom capacity increases that are supposed to be getting more active players in there, that should allow for multiple alliances to be formed, that then allows for you to take more advantage of the warband system, which should then allow for you to have multiple alliances fighting in each of the zones as they're opening up, right? And this would be assuming that you have enough paths in the zone, as we said, to get from one side to the other, that could allow for multiple alliances. Or, like I said, the choke points are wide enough where it's a bridge, it's a ramp, it's a mountain pass, where you can get through with at least 2 or 3 alliances, so to speak, right? And it's going to allow for you to utilize that. And so I think all of those things to me kind of tie all in together. And that's why I actually am somewhat in favor of them lowering alliance capacity. However, what I will say here at the end is that the way that they've gone about it, where even if you wanted to lower alliance capacity, you're not really purely doing it. You're like temporarily lowering it and then going up. And I just don't think that that is the right approach either. One, because it wasn't communicated well enough in advance. And number two is that if you're going to allow, and it goes back to the whole alliance management and kingdom management headaches, right? You're lowering the cap, basically saying no one can leave. And again, I think one of the most obvious things that people have talked about is row, right? So when you talk about roots of war, what happens if you have some people that need to leave the alliance to join another team, but then they want to be able to come back to the alliance? And you have to think about it. When they're gone, especially if you're in a top active alliance, right, you're losing out on all those chests. You're losing out on any events that they're going to be doing together. You're going to lose out on however many amount of rewards, right? And you may even be less likely at times to spend if you're not able, because some people may view this as, well, if I spend, I want what I'm spending to also be to be given, right? I want those rewards to be able to be grabbed and accepted by the other members of that alliance. Now, that may not necessarily be every single person may feel that way, but I guarantee you some people will, which is, why am I going to spend outside of this top or main alliance or the one that I'm in if other people can't reap the rewards from me spending as well? And so I just think there's a number of points of view here. But I think overall, with the way that this was done, and I think the uproar that you're kind of seeing from the community is, I mean, I don't know, well, I guess I could say it's warranted. I will say that it's understandable why it's happening because of some of the points that I've outlined. And I just think that this could have been done in a better way from the dev standpoint. And I'd love to hear what you guys think, right? Especially on whether it's on, again, how was this communicated? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think this could have been done better? And then also, what are your thoughts on them maybe lowering the alliance capacity, even if this was something to happen later on, for some of the points that I had mentioned, if you agree or disagree with that? Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot here. The point of, the last thing I'll give you too is the point of like increasing alliance capacity, because we were talking about this in the chat where someone had brought up this idea of like, they had asked, well, boss, what do you think about if they just raise the cap to like 800 people for the alliance? And this is something that I think if the game was going to go in a direction where it was going to be more alliance focused, and you were just going to say, well, yeah, let's just raise alliances to like 4, 6, or 800 people, and then just have it mainly be like one alliance that kind of houses everyone, I do think that could be an interesting approach. Do I think that that would make a lot of sense right now in this moment, just given the direction and path that the game is now going and has kind of transitioned and pivoted to? I just don't really think so. But I do think it would be interesting. Like if this was something they did in the very beginning of the game and they said, well, we're just going to try and do things different. This is how we want our game to be. And I think if they had a really good game plan for that, part of me just really feels as though there's too many consistent traditional things in this game within the Kingdom Builder genre that really, even if you compare it to Rock or Infinity Kingdom or others, there's just too many similarities that fall in line with more traditional kingdom building that I just don't know if that would be the best approach at this moment in time compared to what they are doing and from the recent transition that they have started to make. So yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. That's going to do it for me. As always, until next time, I'll catch y'all later.